When the Master speaks of faith as a grain of mustard seed, is he praising a quantity of belief, urging you to strain for more, to accumulate morsels of courage until the pile is high enough for God to notice? Or is he uncovering a test of consciousness, a way of seeing that cannot be moved by the gusts of appearance? Let us answer with a most positive yes to the latter, without any mental hesitation or reservation. Faith is not a mood that rises and falls with the weather of thought. Faith is not a statement you recite to outshout fear. Faith is not a hope thrown into tomorrow. Faith is the measure of your non-reaction to appearances. Faith is what you cannot be shaken from. We have all announced beliefs and then, 5 minutes later, felt the pulse race at a headline, the grip tighten at a bill, the breath catch at a symptom. That recoil is the sermon we actually preached in that instant. Do not be condemned by that discovery. Be freed by it. The barometer exists, and it does not lie. Reaction reveals where we have placed power. If power is in God alone, then appearances are not authorities. They are shadows on a wall. To react is to grant them a scepter they do not possess. That is false worship. That is bowing to the mask instead of the face. And so, as a quiet drumbeat through our time together, let us let the prayer pray itself. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory. Therefore this appearance has none. Now, we are not here to scold your humanity. We are here to unveil divinity in the midst of humanity. We are not judging your reactions. We are learning what faith looks like when the bill arrives, when the broadcast blares, when the body reports. Right there, not in a monastery, not in a distant future after many lessons, but in this breath, in this room. Before Abraham was, I am. God works in the infinite nowness. In that now, faith is not clenched. It is relaxed recognition. It says quietly, I and the Father are one. And it rests. I promise you this. Before we conclude, you will have a simple checklist you can apply today. Not theory, practice. Not admiration of faith, observation of it. You will know, without guesswork and without dread, whether you are living in faith or merely speaking of it. Because you will measure nothing mystical and everything practical. How little you are pulled, how quickly you return. So we begin as worshipers, not worriers. We begin with the refusal to give away the kingdom. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. Therefore, my heart will not genuflect to numbers or noise or names of disease. This is not indifference. This is true reverence. We will unfold what this means for action and stillness, for mind and body. But for this holy opening, let us rest in one fact. God is indivisible, one, infinitely expressed, and we are not separate. Faith is the quiet yes that cannot be shaken, because it is not held by us. We are held by it. Amen. Now let us look at this familiar word of the Master that has so often been turned into a whip for the weary. If you had faith as a grain of mustard seed, and immediately the mind, trained in quantities and quotas, sighs, if I could just get a little more faith, a spoonful more, a thimble more, a crumb more. Do you see what that does? It makes faith a human possession, a mental commodity to be increased by personal effort. It reduces the holy to a ledger. It asks the mind to collect faith the way we collect stamps. And all the while, the secret stands quietly in the image itself. The mustard seed is not praised for its size, but for its integrity. It is whole. It is undivided. God is not divisible. God is indivisible. One, infinitely expressed, infinitely manifest. The potency of the mustard seed is not that it is tiny. It is that it is not mixed, not alloyed, not part God and part something else. And so hear the crisp correction. Not more faith, but less division. Not a bigger belief, but an undivided awareness. Not a strenuous reaching toward a future attainment, but a present recognition of what already is. Before Abraham was, I am. I and the Father are one. This is not poetry to be admired. This is ontology to be recognized. Faith, then, is the immediate, unshakable yes to that I am, which is present now, functioning now, governing now. You see how simple and how searching this becomes. The very moment you grant power to an appearance, be it a headline, a number, a diagnosis, you have already stepped out of mustard seed faith into a mixture. Faith and fear, God and another power. In that instant, the seed is no longer whole in your awareness. It is divided. And division breeds reaction. Reaction is the evidence that you are worshiping two altars. But, beloved, there are not two altars. There is one. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory. Therefore this appearance has none. God works in the infinite nowness. The mustard seed life cannot be lived in later. Later belongs to the debate between powers. Now belongs to the recognition of one. Now is not a time. Now is the presence itself. To abide there is not to clench the fists and shout down fear. It is to relax into what is forever true. The Christ does not say, "One day I shall be one with the Father." He says, "I and the Father are one." He does not wait for antiquity or posterity to certify it. Before Abraham was, I am. This is the seed's wholeness, undivided, unpostponed, unafraid. So we are not going out to hunt for more faith. We are consenting to less division. We are withdrawing the counterfeit scepters from appearances and letting God be God. And as we do, the barometer will tell no lie. The reaction's quiet, the heart returns more quickly, and the inner word rises like a clear bell. Thine, thine, thine. One power, one presence. Now, you can say, I believe, and I do not question your sincerity. You can recite a creed, you can sing a hymn, you can line your shelves with spiritual books. And still, when a certain name appears on the caller ID, the heart can leap with dread. When a certain envelope arrives, the breath can shorten. When a certain ache announces itself, the mind can race. That instant is the revelation. In that instant, you learn your theology not by your confession, but by your reaction. The barometer will not flatter you, and it will not shame you. It will simply tell the truth. Your reaction is your real theology for that moment. Faith, then, is the refusal to grant appearances power. Why does reaction matter? Because reaction is the mind's amen to the appearance. Reaction proclaims, you are real. You have authority. You can do something to me. In that assent, the inner altar is divided. God and this headline. God and this number. God and this report. And the moment there are two powers in consciousness, there is fear. There is strain. There is the impulse to defend and to attack and to fix. But God is not divisible. God is indivisible. One, infinitely expressed, infinitely manifest. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. Therefore, this appearance has none. Remember our principle of appearance and reality. You have never seen a tree. You have seen your concept of a spiritual tree. You have never seen my hand. You have seen your concept of the hand, while the true hand, the spiritual idea, remains invisible, perfect, untouched. In like manner, you have not seen lack. You have seen a number on a page and called it reality. You have not seen disease. You have seen a report about the body and called it identity. These are concepts, forms of thought, moving shapes on the screen. Reality is the invisible life maintained by God, the substance of all form, the law of all activity. To react is to crown the concept. To rest is to witness the reality. Now let us be gentle with ourselves. We have all reacted. I have. You have. The work is not self-accusation. The work is immediate return. Be still and know that I am God, not later, not when the situation improves, but now. Return at once to the recognition of one. Refuse the second power, its counterfeit scepter. How? Begin with the simplest practice, the pause. One breath, one holy refusal, one remembrance. In that breath, you do not argue with the appearance. You deny it authority. In that breath, you do not create a truth. You yield to truth. And the inner word rises of itself. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. In this pause, the mind ceases its pretense of authorship and becomes an instrument. It does not engineer outcomes. It listens. It does not project futures. It abides. It consents to the infinite nowness where God is already functioning. And as consent deepens, reaction loosens. The pulse steadies. The fear finds no altar on which to burn. Action may be taken, words may be spoken, steps may be arranged, but not under the lash of a second power. They flow as the effortless form of one power already governing. So we measure, not to condemn, but to awaken. If the barometer spikes, we pause. If the heart stumbles, we return. And with each return, the theology of the moment changes. Your reaction is your real theology, and your practiced pause is the gate by which theology becomes truth realized. Thine is the kingdom, now. Thine is the power, now. Thine is the glory, now. And so the seed remains whole in our awareness, and appearances recede into their proper nothingness before the presence of the One. Now we come to the root of the matter, the spring from which fear draws its water. We have said, God is omnipotent. And then we have portioned out smaller thrones to money, to bodies, to governments, to people we love and people we fear, to the clock on the wall and the calendar in the drawer. We have erected a pantheon in consciousness, a little altar here and a little altar there. And then we wonder why the heart trembles when one of those altars shakes. Beloved, this is the inner civil war. God and money. God and germs. God and deadlines. But God is not divisible. God is indivisible. One, infinitely expressed, infinitely manifest. Fear is not merely a feeling to regulate. It is an admission that something besides God can act. The instant the pulse jumps at a number or a name, we have granted that number or that name the power to bless or to curse, to give or to take away, to make us or to unmake us. That is worship, however unconscious. Reaction is worship of a second power. And where there are two powers, there must be conflict, for one must be defended and the other defeated. And the mind recruits the body and the tongue and the hours of the night into that futile campaign. But before Abraham was, I am. I and the Father are one. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. There is not a leftover portion for appearances. Let us be plain. Our warfare is not with persons, institutions, conditions. We do not wrestle with flesh and blood. We wrestle with the suggestion of power in flesh and blood. The correction is not to make a better person out there, or a better number on the page, but to remove the stolen scepter from them in our own awareness. We refuse to fight shadows. We turn on the light. And in that light, the shapes on the wall lose their terror. Not because they have been conquered, but because they never were authorities. Only concepts projected upon the screen of sense. You will notice how practical this becomes. If God is the only power, the first evidence is not fireworks, not headlines about miracles. It is a quieter life. Less drama in the inner weather when the world presents its pictures. The email arrives and you do not leap. The voice raises and you do not mirror it. The body whispers and you do not bow. You do not become passive. You become unterrified. Action may come, phone calls, appointments, signatures, but no longer as tribute paid to a second power. It flows as obedience to one. Practice the simple renunciation in the secret place of your own thought. When a report appears, do not rush to contradict it verbally. Withdraw the belief that it can act. When a bill arrives, do not plead with a future. Rest in the fact that supply is divine activity now, and let the next right step be given, not forced. When an argument tempts, do not try to win. Refuse the premise that another will can threaten your being. God is not divisible. God is indivisible. One, infinitely expressed, infinitely manifest. As this becomes the settled recognition, the civil war ceases. Faith is peace, not because circumstances always flatter us, but because no circumstance is enthroned as a power. The barometer calms, the pause shortens, the now brightens, and we find ourselves living not among rival forces, but within the single life that is already governing, here and now, without competitor and without delay. Thine is the kingdom. Thine is the power. Thine is the glory. Notice how the mind's storms recruit time as their chief ally. What if it gets worse? What if I can't make it next month? What if this never changes? Reaction lives on those questions, and every one of them borrows a future and drags it into this moment like a chain. Or it rummages in a past and says, "This happened before, therefore it shall happen again." Beloved, that is not faith. That is time worship. Faith is not a mortgage on tomorrow. Faith is not a museum of yesterday. Faith is the recognition of one presence and one power, now. God works in the infinite nowness. The Christ is not postponed. Harmony is not scheduled for the 30th of the month, or for the day after the medicine, or for the morning when circumstances decide to be kind. Before Abraham was, I am. Not, I shall be if. Not, I was when. I am now. I and the Father are one now. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory now. Let me give you a simple picture. A traveler sits in a car on a winding mountain road, staring at a red line of brake lights and a sign that says, "Delay, 45 minutes. Down in that curve of the canyon, time seems thick and distance long. Meanwhile, a child at home opens a map app and sees the same scene from above. The whole road, the valley, the town beyond, collapsed into a single view. Here and there, delay and arrival are one screen. Which is real? Both pictures exist as measurements, but the overview does not strain. It beholds. The child has, in consciousness, risen from the curve to the sky. So it is with you. When you abide in sense, you count minutes and miles and brace for what might be. When you abide in spirit, the whole is present, undivided, unthreatened. Time is a mental measurement. Reality is the presence that is. Faith, then, is your willingness to live in the now without borrowing trouble, without rehearsing future disasters, without demanding that tomorrow verify God. You do not say, "If the payment clears, then God is." You say quietly, "God is." You do not say, "If the pain leaves, then life is." You say, "Life is." You do not say, "If the climate of the world changes, then peace is possible." You say, "Peace is." Thine is the kingdom. Thine is the power. Thine is the glory. Therefore, this appearance has none. Now, what happens in practice? The bill arrives, and instead of projecting a movie of next month's lack, you withdraw the fantasy and rest in present supply as divine activity. In that rest, the next step appears, an idea, a call, a rearrangement, without the lash of fear. The body whispers, and instead of plotting recovery on a calendar, you abide in the fact of invisible life functioning as the only law of your being now. And a wise instruction rises. Rest, call, adjust, without panic. The news blares, and instead of fastening your hope to an event out there, you consent to the government of God within, and right action finds you. Living in the now, you stop demanding signs because the sign has become your atmosphere. You cease forcing outcomes because the outcome, God, is already present. And in that atmosphere, the mind, relieved of authorship, begins to receive. A divine impulse, felt or sensed within, directs the very next step, not in a hurry, not in a haze, but in the clear, quiet certainty of the one who is operating now. Thine is the kingdom, here. Thine is the power, here. Thine is the glory, here. And so we go on, not carried by time, but carried by God. Now we must see why the storm rises inside it all. It is not merely because a bill comes, or a name is spoken, or a body whispers. It is because the mind instantly takes the throne and assumes authorship. I must fix. I must solve. I must plan. I must protect. I must control. That is a burden the mind cannot carry, and under it the heart contracts, the breath shortens, the muscles grip. Reaction is the smoke from that overworked engine. We have conscripted a fine instrument to do the work of a creator, and then we blame the instrument when it shakes. Let us restore the holy order. The mind is an instrument of awareness, not a factory producing security. It is a transparency for divine ideas, not an inventor of life. I am not making the stars come out, nor the moon to rise, nor the sun to set. I am perfectly content to let God run the universe, and that includes the universe that some call my affairs. Answered prayer is not the result of mental carpentry. It is the result of a divine impulse felt or sensed within. God is not divisible. God is indivisible. One, infinitely expressed, infinitely manifest. In that one, ideas are ever flowing, ever forming as right action, right word, right timing. And the mind, at rest from authorship, becomes a clear window for their appearing. Mark the difference between mental force and inner receptivity. In force, we take even sacred words and make of them hammers. Affirmations become pressure. I declare, until the jaw aches and the heart is no quieter. That is still reaction disguised as prayer, still an amen to a second power we are trying to outshout. In receptivity, prayer is listening. We grow still, not vacant, not lazy, but still, until the word is felt. When it comes, it carries its own peace. It does not argue with the appearance. It renders the appearance powerless by revealing presence. Be still and know. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. In that knowing, the next step, call, wait, speak, be silent, rises of itself, free of hurry. You can test this in your own being. Reaction feels like contraction. The shoulders rise, the breath becomes thin, the tongue rehearses speeches, the calendar becomes a tyrant. Faith feels like an inner opening, a quiet widening in which you sense, without words, I and the Father are one. The jaw softens. Time loosens its grip. Nothing has yet changed on the screen, but the scepter has been withdrawn from it. Guidance appears, not as a flood of plans, but as a simple sufficiency. This, now. And we shall not keep this as theory. The news cycle will reveal whether you are forcing or receiving. The bill will show whether your mind has climbed on the throne or taken its right place as a window. The symptom will tell you if you are hammering at the body or abiding in life. When the mind stops trying to be creator and becomes receptive, reaction dissolves and faith becomes natural. Thine is the kingdom, therefore I do not strain. Thine is the power, therefore I do not force. Thine is the glory, therefore the way is already prepared. Be content to let God run the universe and watch how quietly, how certainly, the universe answers. Now let us bring this home to the loudest room in the house, the screen that shouts. The world picture flashes across your devices with urgency and music. It begs for your fear. It solicits your anger. It hawks prophecy as entertainment. Do not misread our teaching. Non-reaction is not apathy. It is not withdrawal into a cave of indifference while others weep. Non-reaction is the holy refusal to enthrone appearances as power, while remaining entirely available to wise, loving action. It is the interior poise that keeps the channel clear so that when action is required, it is God's impulse, not human panic, that moves. Here is your simple checklist when the banner blares, breaking. First, did I feel a surge of fear or anger and treat that surge as authority? Second, did I at once take sides in hatred, us and them, saints and devils, forgetting one life? Third, did I forget God's omnipresence and omnipotence as the only government? Fourth, did I begin prophesying disaster, building cathedrals of dread in imagination? If yes to any, you have not sinned. You have simply located your altar for this moment. Withdraw the scepter you handed the picture. Refuse a second power its throne. How do you reset? With a brief litany that returns you to reality. Thine is the kingdom. Thine is the power. Thine is the glory. Therefore, no other power is present here. Say it once. Say it twice. Say it until the breath deepens and the inner weather clears. Do not argue with the broadcast. Let the presence render it powerless by revealing itself. Then practice the inward pivot. Behold the picture. Acknowledge that it is a picture. And retire a moment into the sanctuary of recognition. God is governing where the camera points. God is the life of every life named in that story. God is the law of every law that seems to act. I and the Father are one. One presence. One power. Now, from that stillness, action may arise. Vote, help, donate, call, serve. Yes, and sometimes speak with firm clarity. But notice the motive power. Not hatred, not fear, not the intoxication of outrage. Peace moves you. Wisdom times you. Love chooses your words. The same call made from panic sows panic. The same gift given from fear multiplies fear. Non-reaction does not cancel action. It purifies action. It removes the grid of anxiety from the instrument, so the tone is true. Try it the next time a headline attempts to colonize your heart. Pause. Litany. Pivot. Wait for the quiet impulse. Then go, as sent, not driven. Thine is the kingdom. Therefore I do not bow to noise. Thine is the power. Therefore I do not fight shadows. Thine is the glory. Therefore the good is already present, and my part will appear. Now we turn to the altar most of us visit without knowing it. The paper altar. The screen altar. The row of figures that pretend to be law. Rent, debt, scarcity, inflation, names on a page. Demand emotional tribute. The knot in the stomach, the shallow breath, the hurried scheme. But remember our principle. Appearances solicit worship by reaction. Faith refuses their scepter and bows to one. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory. Therefore this appearance has none. Here is your simple checklist when money pressure knocks. First, did I accept lack as a power? Did I, even subtly, say in my heart, this number decides my day, my mood, my God? Second, did I identify myself as a mortal supply, a limited earner among limits, forgetting the I that lives before numbers and after numbers? Third, did I rush into frantic schemes, juggling, pleading, bargaining with time and people, before I was still enough to hear the inner word? Fourth, did I forget that supply is God's infinite expression, not a human manufacture? That fulfillment is a law of being, not a prize of effort? If yes to any, you have not failed God. You have found the place to return. Withdraw the scepter you handed the figures. Refuse a second power its throne. Let us make the distinction that sets you free. This is not you. This is yours. You are not a bank balance. You are the invisible I maintained in God. The same I that looked out through the infant eyes, the youth's eyes, the seasoned eyes, unaltered by the columns of arithmetic. You have never seen supply. You have seen concepts of supply, dollars and decimals, accounts and invoices. Reality, the substance of supply, is spirit, infinite, indivisible, already present. God is not divisible. God is indivisible. One, infinitely expressed, infinitely manifest. So we practice the inward decree, not as force, but as recognition. God is the substance of supply. God is the activity of fulfillment. God is the law of adjustment and circulation. Therefore, this appearance cannot govern my peace, cannot claim my identity, cannot interrupt the flow of what already is. Say it as a quiet knowing, not as a hammer. Thine is the kingdom, therefore this ledger is not Lord. Thine is the power, therefore this due date is not destiny. Thine is the glory, therefore good is present now, and the form of it will appear in right time and right way. From that stillness, practical wisdom comes. Budgeting is not denied, it is guided. Work is not despised, it is consecrated. Phone calls are made, not as panic, but as honesty and clarity. You may rearrange, reduce, renegotiate, create, yes, but notice the motive power. Not fear compulsion, not the scramble that breeds more scramble, but the gentle insistence of a divine idea arising. The same spreadsheet drawn from terror tightens the noose. The same spreadsheet, touched by peace, becomes a map for freedom. The human mind ceases to be author and becomes instrument. A divine impulse, felt within, indicates the next sufficiency. This, now. Lack is an appearance that demands reaction. Faith is the calm recognition of inexhaustible supply as divine activity. Abide there. Be still and know. I and the Father are one. Before Abraham was, I am. And watch how the figures, which once shouted as judges, take their rightful place as servants, useful, amendable, harmless, under the government of the One. Thine is the kingdom, thine is the power, thine is the glory. Now we come to the most intimate test of our practice, the place where the picture seems to be closest and the voice the loudest, the body's report. A twinge in the night, a word on a printout, a look on a face in a white coat, and the heart believes it has found authority. Of course it feels tender here. Of course the impulse to react is strong. The body picture seems immediate, personal, unavoidable. But, beloved, remember, the nearer the picture seems, the more precious the pause becomes. We are not asked to dramatize, we are asked to discern. We are not commanded to deny sensation, we are invited to refuse it lordship. Faith is not hardening the will against the body. Faith is softening into the one life that is the only law of this being. Now, you have heard it before. Hear it again where it counts. You have never seen life. You have witnessed a concept of life, pressure numbers, images, tones, colors on a screen. You cannot see my hand. You see your concept of a hand. The hand itself, the spiritual idea hand, is invisible, eternal, perfect. This visible form is not you. It is yours. The report about the body is not your identity. It is a moving picture on the screen of sense. Reality is the invisible life, God as life, maintaining and governing being without opposite and without rival. God is not divisible. God is indivisible. One, infinitely expressed, infinitely manifest. To grant the picture power is to set up a second altar. To rest in life is to abide with one. Now take the honest inventory, the checklist that tells the truth without scolding. Did I, in that first instant, grant the condition power to bless or to curse? Did I, even subtly, say, I am this diagnosis, I am this pain, trading the eternal I for a passing picture? Did I begin to live in worst-case futures, borrowing days I do not have and filling them with scenes God did not author? Did I, in the rush, forget the simplest truth, I and the Father are one, and so step out of the infinite now into the corridors of time and fear? If yes to any, you have not failed. You have discovered where to return. And return with a prayer that is not a plea, but a recognition. Father, Thou art the only power. Thou art life itself. I abide in Thee, and Thou abidest in me. I and the Father are one. Be still and know that I am God. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. Therefore this appearance has none. Say it, not as a hammer, but as a homecoming. Let the breath deepen. Let the shoulders drop. Let the inner altar be one again. From that stillness, be practical. Be responsible. Be kind to the form that is yours. Seek counsel if wisdom prompts it. Rest if the impulse is given. Keep the appointment if it arises from peace and not from panic. Take the simple step that presents itself, not as tribute to a second power, but as the natural form of one life caring for its own. The mind is not author, it is instrument. In the infinite nowness, a divine impulse will indicate this, now. Call, wait, adjust, rejoice. Without fear's whip and without time's tyranny. Peace is not postponed until the picture flatters you. Peace is the atmosphere in which right action appears. So let the report be what it is, a report. And let identity remain what it is, life, God, indivisible, unopposed. You are not a reading. You are the I that was before numbers and will be after numbers. Before Abraham was, I am. Abide there. Refuse the second power its scepter, and watch how, in the quiet, harmony reveals itself. Not manufactured, not imported, but uncovered, as the ever-present fact of God's government. Thine is the kingdom. Thine is the power. Thine is the glory. Now, let us now abandon the romance of the rare, the notion that faith proves itself in one grand crisis and then retires to a frame on the wall. No, beloved, faith is not a headline. It is a heartbeat. It is not a once-for-all performance. It is a pattern, a holy cadence, a returning and returning and returning until reaction forgets its old path and peace remembers its home in you. We do not make vows to climb Everest. We learn to breathe on the sidewalk of each hour. Faith becomes observable not by our stories about belief, but by the frequency and the swiftness of our little returns to the One. Begin simply. 3 conscious pauses a day. Morning, midday, night. Not long, not labored. 30 seconds, 60 seconds, a minute at most. Close the outer door if you can. Close the inner door whether you can or not. Step back from the mental movie. Whisper within, not as force but as recognition. I and the Father are one. God works in the infinite nowness. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. Therefore this appearance has none. Breathe. Be still and know. Then back to the task at hand, but not as a servant of 2 powers. Only one. After a week, widen the cadence, 8 times a day. then 10, then 12. In time, let it become 20 little withdrawals sprinkled through the hours, especially when provoked, when a headline flashes, when a bill pings, when a body whispers, when a voice rises, when a compliment tempts vanity or a criticism wounds pride. Each is a bell, not to alarm, but to call to chapel. 30 seconds will do. The mind is not creator, it is instrument. Let it lay down the hammer and take up the listening. In that moment, the habit of reaction loosens its grip, and the divine impulse, the quiet this, now, finds a clear path. Curate the fields you walk. Reduce stimulants that inflame the nerves of reaction, the endless scroll, the gossip current, the fevered commentary, the too many shows that rattle the senses, the social whirl that shouts, more, more. Replace them with inputs that lift you above emotionalism into spiritual altitude. A psalm at dawn, a page of inspired truth at noon, a recording in the evening that turns thought Godward. Read what clears the air. Listen to what slows the pulse. Attend to what reminds you that God is indivisible. 1. Infinitely expressed, infinitely manifest. What is the fruit? Over time, reaction loses its speed. The interval between appearance and disturbance widens. The surge comes slower, smaller, then not at all. The mind ceases to sprint, the heart ceases to brace. Guidance appears more quickly because you are available more often. Action becomes simpler, kinder, more exact, because panic no longer holds the pen. Peace, which was a visitor, becomes the atmosphere. And you can measure this, not by boasting, but by noticing how swiftly you return when stirred, how frequently you pause when pressed, how naturally the litany rises. Thine is the kingdom, thine is the power, thine is the glory. Now, this is not heroics. This is hygiene. Not a monument, but a rhythm. 3 times a day to begin, then 8, 10, 12, 20, maybe a double portion on Sunday. Frequent, brief, honest returns that break the habit of reaction and make faith visible as a quieter life. Be faithful in little, and you will find that the little reveals the all. I and the Father are one. God is. Now, when you stumble, do not build an altar to your stumble. Beloved, sincere students react. We all, at times, meet a picture that seems to leap faster than our practiced pause. The measure is not that you never flinch. The measure is that you are not kept. Faith is not a pose you hold. Faith is what appearances cannot hold you in. And the relief is this: the way back is always shorter than the imagination promises, because God works in the infinite nowness. Return is immediate, because presence is immediate. Here is the gentle sequence: simple, human, holy. First, notice without shame. Ah, the breath shortened, the jaw set, the story started. That noticing is already light. Second, stop feeding it with commentary. Do not prosecute your own soul. Do not rehearse a courtroom of blame against yourself or another. Withdraw the language that keeps the storm alive. Third, reaffirm one power. Quietly, not as a shout, but as a knowing. Thine is the kingdom. Thine is the power. Thine is the glory. Therefore this appearance has none. God is not divisible. God is indivisible. 1. Infinitely expressed, infinitely manifest. I and the Father are one. Fourth, listen. Be still and know. Let the mind relinquish authorship and take its rightful seat as instrument. A divine impulse, felt or sensed within, will come. Peace first, then direction. Fifth, take the next right step quietly. Not dramatic, not advertised, not forced. This, now. Replace self-attack with truth. Condemnation is just another mask on the same suggestion of two powers. It says there is a separate self with a separate failure that now has separate consequences. Refuse it the scepter. Hold it in the same light you hold the bill or the broadcast or the symptom. An appearance claiming authority it does not possess. Stand, not accused, but included. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Neither fear nor failure, neither things present nor things to come, neither height nor depth, nor any other creature, including the creature of self-judgment, shall be able to separate us from the love that is the very life of us. Before Abraham was, I am. The inseparability is the fact. Your return merely acknowledges what never left. You may say, but I returned and then I reacted again. Then return again, 100 times in a day if needed. Each return breaks a thread. Soon the net gives way. The prodigal pattern is not a single scene. It is the rhythm of awakening. Feel the famine of reaction. Remember your Father's house. Arise and go. And always you are met, not scolded, by the love that was your home while you wandered. This is not indulgence, it is accuracy. God is now. Remember our aim. We are not grooming a superior personality, polishing a better reactor. We are yielding a consciousness in which one power is recognized, and therefore harmony, which already is, becomes visible. The glory is not in our performance. The glory is God's. And so, when you fail the test, do not pause at the mirror. Pass through it. Notice, stop the commentary, reaffirm one, listen, and take the quiet step. Thine is the kingdom. Thine is the power. Thine is the glory. And in that doxology, the heart rests, the mind receives, and the way, already prepared, appears. And now, what shall we say of the fruit? When the surge subsides and the mind relinquishes its throne, there is a quiet proof no argument can manufacture. Faith, like a mustard seed, has not swelled into a louder belief. It has clarified into undivided recognition. One presence, one power, here. We have watched the barometer we cannot fake. Reaction. We have learned that our theology is not our talk, but our tremor. Not our declarations, but the swiftness of our returning. And we have practiced the simple way. Frequent, brief, honest withdrawals into the infinite now until the habit of reaction loosens and the rhythm of peace holds. Hear the conclusion that ends the strain. We do not make harmony. We stop arguing with it. Harmony is not a product we assemble under pressure. Harmony is presence. God is the only power, and where God is all, discord has no law to live by. God is not divisible. God is indivisible. One, infinitely expressed, infinitely manifest. We do not coax God into our scene. We awaken to God as the scene's reality. And as argument fades, what always was begins to show itself. Order without whip, sufficiency without scramble, guidance without clamor, life running by grace. So let us seal this teaching in prayer, not as performance, but as recognition. Thine is the kingdom. Thine is the power. Thine is the glory. I and the Father are one. Before Abraham was, I am. God is, and beside God there is none. God works in the infinite nowness. Be still and know. Amen. Now take this into your day with a simple charge. Choose 3 moments for practice where you are most tempted to enthrone a second power. First, the news. When the banner shouts, pause. Litany. Pivot. Listen. Then act if sent, not driven. Second, the money. When the figure claims lordship, pause. Litany. Remember supply as divine activity. Receive the one next honest step. Third, the body. When the report speaks loudly, pause. Litany. Remember life as your identity. Proceed with whatever care arises from peace, not from panic. In each, withdraw the scepter from appearance. Return to the infinite. Let the mind be instrument, not author. And then rest in this assurance that does not tire. When you are content to let God run the universe, you will find the universe, including your human scene, quietly, steadily, benevolently, running by grace. The rowboat of events ceases to define you. The balloon view of spirit becomes your dwelling. Time loosens. Pressure thins. The next right step appears with its own sufficiency. Thine is the kingdom. Therefore the government is present. Thine is the power. Therefore no other claim can stand. Thine is the glory. Therefore harmony is the fact. God is now. And in that now, reaction ends and reality is revealed.